All right. Hello, friends, family, loved ones. Hope you're all well. Hope you're kind of ready to sort of wrap up this paper, put the last few touches on this first draft, and kind of put everything together. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes here today doing a couple last minute things, and specifically today, we're going to talk about dialogue. Specifically, that whole personal interview thing. And I know some of you have been contemplating and thinking about, whom that person is you're going to interview. It might be maybe a family member, friend, maybe a doctor, counselor, um, professor, teacher, something like that, dog catcher, mailman, I don't know. But you're going to be interviewing somebody, right? Somebody significant to the topic that you're, working on. And at some point after you do that interview, you're going to be integrating the dialogue, the conversation you had into your paper itself. So there's a few ways to do that, and so that's what I want to kind of share with you today. Exactly how do you integrate or incorporate the conversation you had with that person. So I want to first take you back to this chapter I know you're very familiar with, chapter 22, the beginning part of our explorations chapter. Of course, you're all familiar with this first essay here. Talking with Granddad. This is a conversation. I'm not going to spend too much time with it because I'm sure you all know it inside and out. But I do want to point out a couple things, and that is the dialogue that Brian had with his granddad, right? The granddad is the guy who had dementia and Alzheimer's. It's a topic that Brian's using for his story here that he's sharing with us, this exploration of the topic. And you can see here this first part of this dialogue, right? We can look at it as an interview he had with his granddad. I'm just going to highlight it here for you so you can see how he did it here in his essay. Oh, that's driving me crazy. And he basically incorporated just this very, very brief, right? Your conversation doesn't have to be very long. He incorporated just a few sentences right here in the first part of his dialogue. This was actually in his narration. You might have done this too already, honestly. Right? You can see just a few lines here, right? Hey, Granddad, it's me, right? I'm Brian, your grandson. How you been holding up? Grandpa responds, I'll be damned. I'll be damned. Right? Hey, I have a girlfriend now. You remember, right? You remember this conversation. It just kind of goes line by line. You kind of already know who's talking just by, the new sentences, the new lines, right? Here's Brian talking. I'm Brian, your grandson. How you been holding up? I'll be damned. Granddad's talking. So you kind of get the idea of how that particular dialogue works. And then a little bit later on in this essay, um, Brian turns to his grandmother, a lady named Andrea. Andrea's the grandma. I did decide to see Andrea here. But look at the formatting of this dialogue here. Let me highlight this guy. Um, so this is just same sort of thing. Again, dialogue, conversation incorporated, interview incorporated into this essay, but just formatted a little bit differently, right? And this is not, again, another back and forth between Brian, but this time the grandmother. Now, in your paper, you're probably going to talk to one person, which is totally fine. So it's just you might just have just a couple different ways you're formatting your paper with the one person. Now, if you talk to two people, totally okay. There is no limits on the number of people you can talk to. Just make sure you talk to at least one person. So in this case, Brian's talking to his grandmother, Andrea. So again, right back and forth. Brian, hey, did you make any changes with Granddad during his state of dementia? Andrea, well, anything was, it's already familiar to him that he wanted to say, blah, 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 blah. Well, what ways did Grandpa communicate with you? Oh, he'd reminisce about the old times, right? So just kind of a simple back and forth. So you can see a couple of different ways that you can do it in your own paper. Now, there's another chapter in the text here that I want to kind of share with you, and that's chapter 43, which I believe is in this section here. Nope, I always mess that up. Chapter 43 kind of gives you a few different examples. Another example that wasn't in Brian's essay is a sort of integrated, sort of within the paragraph structure. You can kind of see here, right, where the paragraph's just kind of flowing, and then right kind of incorporated within the paragraph itself is the quote. Do you kind of see that? I'm just going to highlight it here. Within the quote itself, or within the paragraph itself, is the quote. I honestly like doing it this way myself. If I'm going to be writing something, um, I think it just looks nicer, right? It just kind of keeps the flow going. Remember, in our case, if we do it this way, we're gonna ice this quote just like it's any other quote. I'm going to show you an example here in a little bit. Um, but this is one method of doing it, sort of incorporating your quote right within the text itself, not a line by line thing or a, sort of a broken down uh, uh, by, who's saying what, but just kind of just neatly integrated within the text itself. And then the second way, you saw this earlier in the first part of the granddad piece, where it's just kind of a line by line by line. Each sentence is a new quote in short. So, like this one, for example, whom do I talk to? She said. Well, the bank manager. Who else? What do I say? Whatever you want to say. Don't speak to me like that. Well, it's just that you should be able to do it yourself. You know how I feel about this, right? You can just, I mean, just kind of reading this out loud, reading in your head, you kind of can hear the back and forth. You know what I'm talking about? And you can kind of do the same thing in your essay, right? With your conversation. Maybe you're having a conversation with your mom about, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, or a conversation you had with, your coach when you were learning how to, make a three-pointer or whatever, right? I mean, you can kind of get the idea, but this is just another way of doing kind of a back and forth with an interview. Then finally, this was the last one we saw. I remember this was the one with Brian and his grandmother Andrea, right? Kind of a Brian, Andrea. This is a back and forth between Emma and Brenda. Emma and Brenda. Same thing. What school did you go to? I attended LaGuardia Community College. Take online classes? Well, I was in hybrid classes. What did you think was lost with online learning, right? Just kind of a back and forth, but this is a much more clear um, uh, conversation here that, just really stands out. Again, you can do it any way you want. Uh, so totally up to you, right? And as they say, right, they call these things as a sort of a rhetorical situation. In other words, that means whatever works best for you. So some people, if depending on the type of story you're telling, maybe this type of interview or this type of conversation or formatting might work better for your type of essay than maybe a different type of essay. It's your paper, whatever you think works best for you. So I wanted to show you one more example. We had sort of a demonstration in my face-to-face class the other day. We had a girl who was doing her topic was on fentanyl, the drug fentanyl, and how much it affects families. Um, so she got up in front of the class. We kind of had a back and forth, just sort of like a mock interview kind of thing. And then how she might apply that interview, right? She's interviewing maybe like a doctor or psychologist or something on how fentanyl affects family members. And then we kind of played it out in the class. Okay, so if you were going to incorporate this into your paper, how would you do it? And what that would look like. And so this is how that kind of worked out. So let me share that with you here real quick. So we kind of did this, and it looks sort of like this. Hopefully you can kind of see this. So this is like the three different examples we just talked about. So this is sort of the first one. This is kind of like integrated into the paragraph. So this is like kind of the first example from that chapter 43. So this was the student who went into the doctor's name was Dr. Jones, by the way. I visited and remember icing the quote, right? Integrate. This is if you incorporate the quote within a paragraph, you'll probably want to ice it, right? Which means integrating it or introducing it, citing it, and then explaining it. Everyone talked about that. So she starts by introducing the quote itself. I visited Dr. Jones, a medical resident, blah, 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 on a date. Dr. Jones replied with, quote, fentanyl can have had many terrible side effects. He added that, this. So it's kind of, you can kind of see the back and forth. And then she explained it at the end. Fentanyl is such a dangerous and powerful drug. The effects of it are not only detrimental. So this is one way to do it. And then here's the back and forth, right? The line by line. This was kind of the beginning of the granddad story that we talked about. Hey, can you tell me how fentanyl affects the brain? Fentanyl can have many negative effects, such as impairment. Well, I would imagine that a drug like this would also profoundly affect the family as well. Certainly, a family member involved with a drug like the, blah, 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 Dr. Jones explains to Sally. Right, so you can kind of see that, how that back and forth works. And then lastly, this is sort of how the dialogue would go, right, if you wanted to actually spell it out in your paper. Right, Sally says, or basically, Dr. Jones, can you tell me how the fentanyl is done? Dr. Jones says, well, fentanyl can have many effects. Sally, well, that sounds like a very powerful drug. How would I imagine? Blah, blah, blah. Dr. Jones, well, most definitely. So you can do, again, you can do this any way you want. The one thing that I didn't include here that we did in class is remember you would have to cite it. So remember you guys actually did this in that interview project of yours where you included a works cited page, you cited it and did all that stuff. So I didn't do that here. We spent a whole bunch of time on that the other week, so I'm not going to bore you with it again. But in short, this is an example of how you would do or incorporate dialogue into your paper. Okay? Hope that makes sense. Have fun with your interviews and your dialogues. Remember, if you haven't lined up an interview yet, you'll probably want to do it soon, because the final drafts or the rough drafts are coming up here really, really quickly. So, again, hope this helps. Good luck. If you need anything, please let me know. All right. Take care, everybody, and we will yak at you soon.